This video, I'm going to show you one of the craziest sessions I've ever played, but not in the way you expect. This is our results so far this year. They're very bad. We're going to try to improve them this session.
First hand, we look down at ace queen offsuit. We have a low jack raise to $7. I raise it up to 15 since 7's a bit low. I want to incentivize other players to fold too. We get a call from surprisingly the small blind, and the low jack unexpectedly decides to fold. For context, this table, the reason I'm saying this is one of the craziest sessions I've ever played is this table was one of the nittiest tables I've ever played at. All these hands are going to go way differently from what you expect. I mean, this is just a good starting example where the low jack raises to 7, and then when I min raise him, he folds. I mean, I don't know what his plan was there. So the flop comes 4, 3 of hearts, and the 7 of spades. Not the best flop for us. The small blind's gonna have a lot more low cards in his range, and maybe some flush draws here. We don't have a heart at all. It's not great. He checks though, probably signaling a weak hand, maybe some kind of flush draw. I decide to go for standard range c-bet. He calls. I'm not sure that's a great idea in this spot since, again, his range is way ahead. He has flush draws here, maybe some kind of straight draws, gut shots, just generally like maybe a 7x, very possible. So probably behind the turn comes the jack of spades. He checks again. On this card, since I already bet the flop, I think it makes sense for me to barrel again. I doubt he checks twice here with a very strong hand like a7, since he's probably gonna think he's ahead most time. None of the obvious draws get there. We get another flush draw, and I think the jack could sometimes scare him off. I think I should be betting here a lot more than checking, but I decide to check. And the river peels off another jack of clubs. Now, at this point, I pretty much have nothing. I have air. When he decides to bet out for 16, I really have to ask myself, what is he doing that with? There is a real chance that he turned a jack and now has trips, very possible. He could have 7x, very possible. When betting out here, he has a lot of hands that are just completely beating me with ace high, which is kind of not even beating anything. So I decide to make the fold. This hand, I look down at ace 10 suited. We have the straddle on, the under the gun +1 calls the straddle, and the low jack decides to raise it up to 25. Some of you might argue that this is a bit wide, but I think ace 10 suited is one of those hands that warrants a 3-bet. You're ahead of most of their range in terms of like Broadways, and there are very few aces that are beating you. And even then, you have a good possibility of flush draw, so I think ace 10 suited is a great card to 3-bet to get value. So both the blinds fold, and so does both under the gun. Low jack thinks about it for a while. At this table, which is very nitty, I'm not surprised that he ends up making the fold here, but he did think about it for quite a while, so I really do wonder what he had and what he thought I had. We take the pot down without even seeing a flop, which is always nice. Next hand, we look down at ace king suited. Great hand, love the hand. I'm under the gun, raise it up to $15. We get 2 callers headed to the flop, which comes 7 of spades, 5 of clubs, and queen of clubs. So we have the nut flush draw. It's a great flop for us. I decide to slow play my hand a little bit and check. I think I can see the argument for a bet here. I don't love to bet draws into 2 people, because very often they have a queen here. Basically, I'm not ahead as of right now, so I prefer the check. It checks through, and we see the turn, which is the 6 of hearts, which is not a great card because now we have 3 cards to a straight, but yeah, it doesn't help us in any way at all. And then the big blind decides to fire out for $15. At this point, you have to ask what cards, like what is his range, right? I think he has a lot of queen X here, maybe occasionally some 6 or 7x, maybe some straight draw, but I think most of it is queen X, and we have a good chance of hitting a flush actually on this river, so I stick in the call. This 15 into a $60 pot is pretty good odds, especially if the other player also decides to call, which he does, and I'm getting absolutely great odds to see this river, which comes, this this is just kind of the worst card possible. It's another 6, so I'm definitely not beating any of both players' range. And I mean, this is pretty much a mandatory fold if any of them fire out for any amount of money. Big blind checks, I check too. After tanking for quite a little bit, I actually wonder what he was thinking about. The low jack decides to bet out for 30. I think he definitely has a queen or a 6 here. Pretty sizable bet, maybe some kind of 7. It was definitely ahead of our ace high. And then big blind makes our decision very easy when he raises it to 100, and I know I'm way behind, so I fold. This hand I'm in low jack. I look down at pocket 10s, decide to raise it up to 15. After a under the gun straddle, I get one color from the button. We are headed to a flop heads up, which comes ace, king of hearts, and then the queen of diamonds. We do have the 10 of hearts in our hand, which if we get runner could be pretty great. I have the lowest pair possible here, so if he has any ace, king, or queen, I'm pretty dead here unless a jack comes. I guess, yeah, my only outs are like a 10 or a jack, which isn't great, so I check. Standard kind of check out of position here, and he checks back. Retrospectively, I think looking back at this hand, I have a lot more equity than I think here. I have a backdoor flush draw. I have a gut shot to a straight. You know, pocket 10s is already a strong hand. Even if he has an ace, king, or queen, if I c-bet here on the flop, then it could project strength, and he could possibly fold out some queen X's here. So I think I should have donked out on the flop, especially because I'm probably going to be ahead of his range a good percentage of the time. I mean, sometimes he gets here with some kind of jack X or, you know, suited connector, smaller pair, pocket pair. So I think there is actually a, you know, good reason to c-bet here on the flop, but I decide to check, and he checks back. The turn is the 3 of diamonds. I'd argue this is a brick card. I guess it introduces another flush draw. It shouldn't change pretty much anything at all. So I decide to check again, and after some thinking, he also checks back. And the river is the 4 of clubs. I think this turn and river combined are actually pretty bad, because if he has some wacky low ace X, which sometimes people like to play, you could have a 2 pair. I mean, you could just literally have anything here. Aces are in his range, kings are in his range, queens are in his range. I doubt 2-5 is in his range, but that's also on the board. No flushes. I'm basically beat by a majority of his range at this point. And after he fires out for 10, I don't really know why I called. Like, I don't know what I'm expecting him to have here. I think that was a mistake. He turns over 9-3 offsuit, which was definitely not a hand I was expecting him to have. I table my 10s and I'm good. This hand, I'm on the cutoff. I look down at ace 9 suited. Both the blinds fold, and again, I'm saying this is a very nitty table. There's a lot of limps, and then somebody would raise to like 7 or 10 or 15 in my case, and everyone would fold. Like, I understand if, you know, the whole table is like limping or some kind of high hand promotion, but there was no high hand going on here, so I'm just confused why people would limp and then fold. You know, I don't complain when chips get pushed my way. Next hand, I'm under the gun. I look down at queen jack suited. Oh, sorry, I forgot to record the pre-flop. I think I raised to 15, and then small blind and big blind both call. So now we got to the flop, which came out jack high. The small blind fires out for 15. The big blind decides to raise him to 45, and despite having a jack in my hand, I don't think my kicker is good enough here to continue, so I end up making the fold. One of these players definitely has me beat, and I don't want to pay to find out who it is. This hand, I'm on the big blind, and I look down at ace 9 offsuit. I get 2 limpers, one from the hijack and the small blind complete. The flop completely misses us, so I check, hoping that it checks through, but the hijack decides to bet out for 5. I don't think there's any merit in continuing with this hand. I mean, it is a very small price. Maybe he's doing with some bluffs just to try to take down the pot early, but my hand is so weak here that I don't think there's any merit to calling at all, so I fold.
This is a pretty short video since, as I said, the table was very nitty and I couldn't get any action. I showed you some hands where I just raised pre-flop and everyone folded. Yeah, it was a very tough table to get anything. That was pretty much all the action I got all all night and I was playing for about 5 hours, which kind of goes to show. Well, I played for 5 hours and I played maybe 10 or 15 hands. Some of the other ones I just raised and everyone folds. And I mean, I could, you know, have a compilation of that, but no one's gonna be interested in watching that. These are our results so far. They're pretty horrendous. You know, our goal again is to reach $20 an hour playing low stakes poker this year, and so far we are way off the mark, and something needs to change very quickly. You know, we have a lot of work to do to catch up to where we need to be. Again, I don't want to be the guy who says, oh, I get bad cards, or oh, I get the bad table. You know, I have to focus on the things that are in my control. I guess poker is one of those games that sometimes there's a lot that's out of your control and you just have to let it go. But yeah, thanks for watching.